Well, hello everybody. Welcome to today's GRadulting workshop. My name is Debbie McCutsky, and I am the Coordinator of Services and Programs for Graduate Student Legal Aid. And I'm glad to see you, or at least see your names. Today's question is, how do I get a Maryland driver's license? So whether you are new to Maryland or new to the United States, you may be wondering, do I even need a Maryland driver's license? So that is one of many questions that our speakers will be answering today. And so if you have any questions, submit them in the chat and they will be answered after the presentation. So before we get started, I have a few announcements. As you may know, GRadulting workshops are on Tuesdays at 12:30, and they will usually be recorded. And if you missed our first 3 workshops, which were on health insurance, life hacks, and student loan debt, you can find the links and the presentations, the links to the recordings and the presentations on our website, and I will put that in the chat. Looking ahead to next week, the GRadulting workshop will answer the question, what is changing with U.S. immigration policies and laws? Immigration attorney Patricia Minicon will give us an update and answer your questions. So you'll find the registration link on our website and in our newsletter, and I will also send it out to you by email after the workshop. So let's get started with today's workshop. First, I am pleased to introduce the co-sponsor of today's workshop, the Office of International Student and Scholar Services. They are represented by Jody Heckman-Bose, who is the Associate Director of Student Services, and Gabi Gillespie, Integration Program Manager. Thank you so much, Jody and Gabi, for joining us today. We have a great partnership with the ISSS office. We refer people to them, they refer people to us. We don't want any students falling through the cracks, so don't ever hesitate to reach out to either office. We are well connected. Next up is Zach Mundy. Zach is the Director and Attorney for Graduate Student Legal Aid. He is the one who will be making the presentation today. So I'm just going to turn things over to you, Zach.
There we go. Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Debbie. And so we're going to run through, there's a lot of information today, but we're going to try to get you all the important information for everything you need to know about getting a Maryland driver's license. Thank you for everyone who submitted questions ahead of time. I'm going to try to answer most of them in the presentation, but we are going to have a Q&A at the end, and we're lucky to have our guest, a special guest for our Q&A, who is Anne-Marie Haley, who is from the Motor Vehicle Association from Maryland. She is sort of in a dual role right now. She's a longtime program manager, and now she's switching over to become a branch manager. And so at the end, we're going to get some, she's going to help us answer any questions you have from the more technical side. But please put your questions in the chat if you have any, and I'll try to answer them if I can. And if not, then we'll get to them at the end. So let's share. All right. And so everything you need to know, hopefully everything you need to know for getting a Maryland driver's license. Just to sort of give you our overview, we're going to touch briefly on things that have changed due to COVID. There are just a few minor announcements to make. We're going to try to answer the question of who needs a Maryland driver's license, and then address how to get them. And there's a few different ways, a few different requirements, depending on what your current status and situation is. Do you have a license from another U.S. state? Do you have a license from your home country? Or have you never had a license before, whether you're a domestic or international student? There's different requirements for each, and so we're going to try to run through all of them and provide the framework for you so that you understand what the next steps for you to get that license are going to be. So first, just to address what's going on, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic, makes things a little bit harder. And so all MVA locations are by appointment only, and they do require masks. They're also doing some temperature readings and a few other things once you get there. There's a short questionnaire, which if you're a Maryland student, you already are answering those daily questionnaires about symptoms and things like that. So that's just something to be aware of. You can schedule an appointment online through their portal system. The link is there, but if you just go to mva.maryland.gov, it's pretty easy to find. And so almost all the information today that, we're going to send you this PowerPoint at the end. So you'll have all the links, but you can also go to mva.maryland.gov, and it's a pretty easy to navigate website. If anyone currently has a Maryland license and is sort of here to question, do I need to renew it? It's about to expire. There was an order from Governor Hogan to extend all licenses, registrations, and learner's permits until the end of the state of emergency, which was declared for the pandemic. So if your license or registration or driver's license or learner's permit expired after March 13th, it is still good until the 30th day after the end of the state of emergency. And so that you'll probably hear about that in the news. If you follow the news, but you can check about that, keep up to date about that either through the MVA website or through just maryland.gov to make sure that you aren't missing any deadlines. All right, so the first question is that most people ask is, do I need a Maryland driver's license? Who needs a Maryland driver's license? And the short answer is that every Maryland resident who wants to drive a vehicle needs a Maryland driver's license. The trick here is resident is sort of a legal term of art that is defined a few different ways depending on where you look. And so it's figuring out, are you going to be a resident in the state of Maryland? You may not need a driver's license. Sometimes it's easier to define it the other way. If you do not live in Maryland, easy one, number one, if you live in DC or Virginia, you should get a license there. And you have a license from another US state or another country, or you're a resident of another US state living in Maryland going to school. And so you can choose to sort of remain a resident in your home state. That doesn't work for international licenses beyond a year. But sometimes if you are just a student, just here for a few years, and you're still maintaining residence in your home state, you can keep your out-of-state license. And as I said, if you do not live in Maryland, you're not eligible for a Maryland license. How do you know whether or not you're eligible to keep that home state license for long term? The way that the law defines it is that you need a bona fide connection to your home state. And the options or examples of some of those connections are that you maintain a primary residence in that home state, you own a home there, you continue to pay income taxes in that home state, or your family still lives there. And so some of them are not in and of themselves enough. So if you're, maybe you moved out of the house for the first time, but you never intend to move back home, you're going to sort of stay in Maryland for the long term, or move to another state, you're probably, the safer bet is to get a Maryland driver's license for that residence. But if you were thinking, I'm temporarily keeping my residence out of state because I want to vote in my home state the next election, if you have voting rights, then you can sort of continue to do that and then switch over in the future. As long as you have that bona fide connection, you can then change, and you can choose and elect to lose that in the future, so to speak. You can become a Maryland resident by getting a driver's license, changing over and starting to pay taxes in Maryland as opposed to your home state, and all that sort of thing. The other thing to mention is that if you have any sort of severe sanctions in your home state, whether it's a revocation, whether it's a suspension, any of those things, they are going to affect your eligibility for a Maryland license. And so if you say, you had your driver's license revoked in your home state and then you're trying to just get it in Maryland, the penalties are still going to be enforced in your home state, and forever, whatever the length of time is to that the revocation is supposed to last, then you sort of have to go through those procedures in your home state to have it reinstated. And same for a suspension. You have to wait for the time period to expire and make sure that your license is in good standing again before you're eligible for a Maryland driver's license. Now, assuming you do have that out-of-state license and you want to convert it, then what should you do? You're supposed to apply for a license within 60 days of becoming a resident of the state of Maryland, as long as you have a valid out-of-state license or American or from one of the American territories, Puerto Rico, American Samoa. There's a few others that can qualify. As long as you have a valid license and it's expired for less than a year, it's not that hard. It's really more of an administrative transition where you're just paying the fees to get the new license in the state of Maryland. You're not taking a knowledge test and you're not taking a road test. So we'll get into those a little bit later when we're talking about the requirements for some people do have to take those tests. And so we'll talk about exactly what they are. If you're expiring one that is for more than a year or more, you're required to take the knowledge and driving tests in addition to the vision test. And so that is something that if you're coming up to that deadline, you might want to make sure you convert that. And the state of emergency order doesn't address this specific issue. It only addresses those that are already Maryland licenses. And it's a little unclear. I know that most states have had similar orders. And so it's one of those that maybe your home state has extended it a little bit, but if you're in the over the year category, you probably aren't going to be given the grace period that others were, because it's pre-pandemic. And then finally, if you started the process in another state, sometimes we have students who maybe you got your learner's permit your last year of undergraduate and now you're coming to Maryland. Unfortunately, the learner's permit does not transfer. And so you do have to start the process over again here in Maryland if you want to convert to a Maryland license, or if you're maintaining residence in your home in that state, you can continue the process there until it becomes a full license, and then convert at that time if you choose to change your state of residence. Next up, we have yes, and so this is the stuff for a lot of you that the presentation includes getting a driver's license for international students. So if you have an out-of-country license, so there's sort of our international students either have an out-of-country license from their home country, or you don't have a license yet. And we'll get to that next if you don't have a license yet. But first, if you have an out-of-country license from your home country, it's valid for 12 months in the state of Maryland. If it's not written in English, if the license itself is not in English, you do have to have the translation into English from an MVA approved translator. And there's a list on their website where, to provide additional resources for that. So for up to 12 months, you're eligible to drive on your home country license. As is noted here, we do see problems with that where police officers, it's difficult for them to know. And so on one side of the coin, you might think they're uninformed and not completely competent. That happens. The other side of the coin is it's difficult for them to verify how long you've been in the US when they have just pulled you over for speeding or some sort of traffic violation. And so some officers will choose to write you a ticket that includes this charge as well, sort of driving without a license. It's something that you can then provide the documentation when you go to court for your traffic hearing, and it's not a major issue. But you want to make sure that it's, if you have the opportunity to get your license now, then we strongly encourage you to do so. It's a little bit harder now. We understand that there are additional health concerns about going to public places, and there's reasons why you might not want to do it. But if possible, we do encourage you to get a Maryland license just to avoid any potential mistake from a police officer. Even if that occurs, that hopefully everything gets sorted out when you get in front of a judge, because the judges are more knowledgeable and we can provide you additional resources for citations to the law to help confirm that, that you can take with you and provide to the judge just to make sure. But it's sort of a hassle, and to avoid that hassle, if you can, we strongly encourage you to get the license now. And as it says, international driving permits are not valid in Maryland. So it does have to be a license from your home country. Now, once you have that license, how do you get a Maryland license? And so if you want to convert your out-of-country license to a state of Maryland license, there are a few things you have to go through. So you have to go through a vision screening, a knowledge test, a driving skills test, and an MVA approved 3-hour-long drug and alcohol education program. There are some exceptions that are based on your home country, that you may not be required to take the knowledge or driving test if you're from Canada, France, South Korea, Germany, Taiwan, and Japan. So if that applies to you, fantastic. It'll be a little bit easier. Then you may just have to do the vision test and the drug and alcohol education program. The main thing that you avoid in this process is you avoid having to go through a longer driver's education, that if you do not have a home country license, you do have to go to, it's just called driver's ed here, sort of colloquially. And it is a longer process that has classroom time and all of that. For more information, there is a website that applies to international applicants. I will say that MVA did recently update their website and move things around a little bit. And so last time I checked, this link still worked, but I'll check again before we send it out just to make sure. And the reason I know that there were some problems in changes recently is the S.A.V.E. verification process. Our old link stopped working, and now there's a new link. And so S.A.V.E. verification is when you are applying for a driver's license, there is certain information you must submit to verify your own identity. Now, for international students, yeah, and so we'll send out that link later for the translators list, or we'll put it into the PowerPoint before we send it out. So S.A.V.E. verification is a way to pre-submit your documents that make sure that they are approved and verified. The link that it's harder to find on their website now than it used to be, but this is the link you would want to use, the eGov link, not the one that's mva.maryland.gov, or at least that one stopped working for me. Now, for this, you want to have your information ready from your passport, your I-20, your I-94, your USCIS number, because that's how you're going to sort of begin the process to register. And a lot of times, if you just make an appointment and show up and you didn't pre-submit the S.A.V.E. verification, then they're not going to be able to proceed to the next step, because they're going to need to wait until that information is verified, because they have to verify it federally, and then it'll save you time to pre-submit this. If you don't hear back from them in a few business days, then you can email this address, and that'll hopefully get some clarification for you. Now, what information do you need to submit? You need to submit your proof of age, identity, lawful presence, your social security number or letter of ineligibility, and proof of Maryland residence. Now, a lot of this is sort of the documents we just talked about, your passport, your I-20, your I-94, that sort of stuff can be used. The one thing that is always a question is you may not be eligible for a social security number. So some people have a social security number. Great, it's easy for you to do that. If you do not have a social security number, and you even if you know you're not eligible, you still have to apply for one, and then they will send you a letter telling you you are not eligible for one. Then that letter that says you're not eligible for one will be proof of your sort of letter of ineligibility. And so it'll at least provide you that document so that you can submit it to the MVA. They have a website that is actually pretty helpful, or a part of their website that's really helpful, where you self-select, I want to apply for a driver's license here, and then it gives you sort of a list of what documents are accepted to prove your age and identity, and it'll tell you a previous license, your passport, your sort of, if you don't have that, then there's a combination of paperwork you can use when it comes to birth certificates and other things. Then you have your social security number that you're going to have to prove, and so it'll tell you in each category what documents you can do, and you can click them, and it'll help you make the list and prepare to go ahead. And so that's sort of something you can do without logging in, and it'll tell you exactly what documents they accept, because in some categories, there's a few different options that you can provide. If your passport is recently expired, I believe you're going to have to get it renewed before you're eligible to do this, because my understanding is that it does have a currently valid passport I don't believe there's a grace period for passports, but I will. We can look that up later and confirm that with you. Next up, if you've never had a license, so this is the different category. You don't have a license in your home state. There's an additional step. And so before you can get a license to be able to drive on your own, there's what's called a learner's permit. And a learner's permit is something that, whether you're a domestic student or international student, if you've never had a driver's license, they make you have this learner's permit where you're required to drive with someone else in the car, and that person must be a licensed driver. And so it's sort of to help you learn how to drive and be safe and all that stuff. There's also you then graduate from the learner's permit to a provisional license, which lets you drive by yourself, but there's some additional limitations on it that aren't that burdensome, but it's mainly about avoiding tickets and things like that you might have to have the time that you're on a provisional license reset. And so how do you get a learner's permit? You go through a similar process where you have to pass a vision test and you have to pass a knowledge test. There is a driver's manual that is pretty easy to get through, and it has lots of pictures of signs and things and how to drive and what the laws are in Maryland. It is available in a number of different languages, so that if you prefer to study in a language other than English, not a problem. It's available in a lot of major languages, and so you can find it online at the link. And it's probably not worth it to go to an MVA branch anymore. They used to give you printouts of the little booklets, but that's probably not worth it at this point. They also have online practice tests that you can take for the knowledge test. It's really not that difficult. For all of you are very intelligent people and have taken a number of tests before, and so I'm sure that if you read through the book a few times, then you won't have any difficulty passing it. But once you obtain that, as I said, you do have to have a supervising driver in the car at all times who's at least 21 years of age and has had a U.S. license for at least 3 years. And so they have to be there every time you drive. You cannot drive by yourself if you have a learner's permit. Now, your learner's permit is valid for up to 2 years, or they will sort of sync your learner's permit or driver's license with the end of your legal status in the U.S. if it's going to be less than that time period. So it's 2 years for a learner's permit, 5 years for a license, but they will sync it up if it's going to be less than that, and you just apply to have it renewed or extended if you are going to be staying longer. After you receive your learner's permit, there's 3 requirements you must satisfy before obtaining that provisional license. You must pass a driver's education course. You must drive at least 60 hours in the car with a supervising driver, and you must not sort of get any you must not get pulled over for speeding or have any moving or traffic violations during that period of time. Now it resets if you have a problem. And so the driver's education course is an independent thing that you must go through. It says that it's not offered by the MVA, it's not offered by the University of Maryland. There are private schools that teach it. And so it's 30 hours of classroom time and then 6 hours in the car with a certified driving instructor. During the pandemic, that part of one of the temporary policies is that you can now take this course online. You used to have to take it in person, but there are options to do that online. And so when you go to the website here, they have a list of all of the certified driver's ed schools in the state, and you can contact those schools individually to see if they're providing courses online. My understanding is that a lot of them are doing it now, which makes it more accessible for all of you, because I know a very common thing is you have to get to the classroom, and if you don't have a license yet, you sort of have to use public transportation or have friends or family drop you off. And so all of those things sort of can complicate it. So this will make it more accessible for everybody, but it is sort of only a temporary order. We'll see sort of how many of these orders are going to be extended, become more permanent in the future. Now, I mentioned before that you must complete 60 hours with the supervising driver who's at least 21 years of age and has had their license for at least 3 years. This is sometimes difficult for international students to locate if you've come here on your own and don't have someone to do that with. There's two options for that. One is sort of just try to find other students that you're friends with who have a license, that maybe they're in a PhD program and have been here for a little while and so they qualify for that. The other is that in some circumstances, the driver's ed schools can help you with this. It may cost some money to have that additional time with those drivers, but it is sometimes available depending on the driving school. And just another reminder that every time you drive, you have to have that supervising driver in the car with you. The minimum time, so you must have the permit for a certain, for a minimum number of days before you're able to apply for that provisional license. Now you still have to satisfy all the other requirements. The driver's ed, sort of the additional time, so that's the 30 hours and the 6 hours, and then the 60 hours with your supervising driver. If you're under the age of 18, which probably most of you aren't, you have to have it for 9 months. If you're 19 to 24, which may be some of you, you have to have it for 3 months. And then if you're 25 or older, you only have to have it for 45 days, as long as you still complete those additional options. Questions? Get to that question later. Once you get the provisional license, so how do you get your provisional license? Once you satisfy the requirements for the learner's permit, you then are eligible to take the driving skills test. So that's in the car. The car doesn't have to be owned by you, but you do have to provide the car. And so if you don't own a car, sometimes the driver's ed school, the car that you're going to practice in with them, you can work it out with them that you can use that car, and sort of the instructor will come with you to the test, and they're not going to sort of be in the car for it, but they'll be able to help you with that. And so if you don't own a car, or you don't have a car from a car that you have access to, then that's something that you're going to have to be able to work out and think about ahead of time. And so contacting and asking that question of your driver's ed program is going to be important. If you have a rental vehicle, then you sort of have to be acknowledged as an authorized driver on the rental vehicle. The driving test is taken at the MVA. You can drive through a closed course, or drive on the road and follow directions of the MVA staff. Failing is not uncommon. It happens a lot. They're sort of strict about passing and what needs to be done. In the driver's handbook that I said is available on the MVA website that you use to study for the knowledge test, it also explains everything that's going to take place in the driver's test. And so there are a few different maneuvers that they're going to make you do, and make sure that you can perform safely and adequately. And sometimes, they're really sticklers about it being done the exact right way. And you'll practice those things in your 6 hours of your driver's education course. But if you're eligible to sort of skip the learner's permit, then they're going to be defined in there, and it's just about practicing on your own to make sure you understand exactly what they're looking for. But it's one of those that failures happen. It's not a big deal. So, don't beat yourself up over it. After the first failure, you can take it literally the next day. And so you don't have to wait too long. Now that things are appointment only, that may not be possible. You may not be able to make the appointment for the next day, as opposed to just showing up and walking in. And then after the second failure, they do make you wait a week to sort of give you time to practice your skills. But if you fail, don't worry about it. There's no sort of long-term penalties or anything that you have to worry about. And lots of people fail. And so it's not a big deal. The provisional license, once you pass the driving skills test, you also have to complete the 3-hour drug and alcohol class, and then you'll be able to receive your provisional license. Your provisional license, you need to keep a clean record for this amount of time based on how long you were previously licensed, if you were previously licensed. And so it doesn't have any sort of major restrictions. They do explain what the restrictions are in the driver's handbook, but it's not going to impact your ability to drive by yourself for the most part. Where do you go to do this? Where should you schedule? The two closest MVAs are in Beltsville and in White Oak. And Beltsville is the one that is physically closer. It's just up Route 1, and so you just travel north on Route 1 6 or 8 miles, and you'll see it right there on the left. And the other one is in White Oak, which is west of us in Silver Spring. We have heard in the past that the White Oak branch is a little bit more efficient in processing for international students, but it's really up to you. And then I think at this point, depending on which one has appointments that are available sooner and to fit into your schedule better, because there's not a huge difference. It's just sort of, those are the reports that we've received. And then general resources, as I said, a lot of the information is going to be available on the MVA website, mva.maryland.gov. And if you're a more technical person and don't want to just sort of look at the handbook explanation, you can sort of see the actual law itself for the state of Maryland through this link. It's part of the transportation code. And so if you want to go through the rules, you're a rule-based person, feel free to check that out as well. But otherwise, the MVA website has a lot of guides and FAQs that are really helpful to sort of run through that. And so looking at some of the questions, a valid out-of-country license, do I need a learner's permit? If you have a valid out-of-country license, you do not need to get the learner's permit. You can skip the learner's permit process and go straight to having a license. You still do have to take the vision, knowledge, and road test, unless you are from one of the countries that we have sort of reciprocity agreements with, which are Canada, France, Taiwan, South Korea, and there's 2 others that I'm forgetting, but they'll be on the slide when we send it out. Yes, you can just do that in the 3-hour drug and alcohol test, and you'll be set. Can nearsightedness be a problem in the vision screening test? It can be. It depends on if you have corrected, if you have, I wear contacts. When I don't have my contacts in, I'm nearly blind. I'm sort of at the highest level of non-custom contacts you can get. I wear very strong glasses when I don't have my contacts in, and I still pass the test. You get to wear your glasses or contacts when you're doing the vision test. It's not about your natural eyesight. It's about, can you prove that you can see in what you would be wearing? And they will sort of, if you require corrective, if you require contacts, if you require glasses to take the test, you then are required to wear them when you're driving. But as long as you do that and you can pass the test with those, then you'll be fine, and it wouldn't be a big problem. And with that, I think that's going to be the end of our recorded section, and then we're going to go into our Q&A with myself and Anne-Marie, and sometimes Jody and Gabi have really helpful information about obtaining documents that you need to help present. So maybe they'll chime in as well. But thank you very much.
Can you stop recording, please?